Now let's go ahead and get started with search. Search performs a couple of things when it's indexing content. It's going to be pulling in the metadata, the fields. If you go to a Word document, there are properties associated with that document. And that's going to be the modified by, the created date, the title, things along those lines. All of those properties of a document are what is referred to as metadata. Metadata can be combined to designate a content source. Search indexes also can go out and index the content of a document or of a spreadsheet. But it has to be a known file type. It has to be something that SharePoint already identifies. For instance, all the Microsoft Office products, those are known file types. So SharePoint can open up that document, read the content, and index it, minus any of the noise words, which are and, the, but, and so on. Search frequency can be configured. If it's a dynamic site, if the content is consistently changing, for instance, if it's the team sites for your business, that content is changing all the time because it's active. If I set the content to be crawled every 5 minutes, so to speak, it's going to take 5 minutes for that content to be loaded up into the search. So you won't see the results until it actually goes out and does its crawl. And you can determine what time frame that's going to be. And we'll be demonstrating that here shortly. Run it infrequently for static site. If it's a publishing site, all your department publishing sites, and you have a schedule that content only goes out maybe once a day or once a week, then you can set the content to be scanned and crawled accordingly. It's recommended to start with the default and monitor it from there, and you'll get an idea of how long it takes to do the searches. If it's taking quite a bit of time, you want to make sure that you allocate enough time for the crawl service to finish its job before it starts again. SharePoint service applications. SharePoint Search is one of those service applications. It adds to the SharePoint features and services used to configure search. And there are multiple service applications available. You've got Excel services, business data connectivity. Some SharePoint service applications can be delegated for administrators to manage. For instance, on the search side of it, for the search service application that we're going to be enabling here shortly, that can be delegated out, so you could have a specific search administrator manage that, and it takes it away from the admins having to handle that. Some companies have a dedicated search service administrator. Starting search. Assign services to servers. Search can be quite intensive on the system, so depending on the size of your environment and the number of users, you may choose to take and put the search service on a specific server, and that's its role. That's what it's going to do. Everything about search. Some of the roles for servers: a single server, small; a web server, medium farm; search indexing, dedicated index server. And what this means is the single server, if you have a single server, if it's a standalone, that's what it is. Everything's going to run on that server, including the search services. However, if you have a medium farm with web servers, dedicated WFEs, you may choose to use one of those for the search service or all of them. And then you also have the search indexing. There will be a dedicated search index server, and normally that would not be your WFE. That would be an application server dedicated specifically to that. And you could have a custom special server role. It could do not just search, but maybe it would do access services or something along those lines. It just depends on what your architecture is designed for. Okay, the first thing that we're going to look at is to see what services are running and if search is running on the farm. So to do that, we're going to click System Settings. Under the Servers category, we're going to choose Manage Services on Server. And this is going to give you a list of all the services, and you can choose which server you're looking at. For instance, we only have one server in this farm, but if it were a multi-server farm, they would all be listed here, and you would want to click on the appropriate server that's running that service. Some central administration, that's where we're working right now. Notice that that service is started. Some of the services do require additional configuration, and you'll see links associated with that. And to stop a service, you simply click Stop and Start. We also have Foundation incoming email is started. We have our web application, Foundation web application service started, workflow timer service. These are ones that are on by default. But notice that SharePoint Server Search and SharePoint Foundation Search are both stopped. Once we enable the service application, that'll change. Those will go to started. However, keep in mind, the SharePoint Foundation Search is not required. That provides SharePoint help to the users. It's optional whether you want to do it. Some people are pleased with it, some aren't. So make sure that you evaluate it and that it provides the type of help information that you're looking for. The SharePoint Server Search, this is the search capability right here. And if I click on it, it'll tell you there are no search service applications at this time. But we're going to remedy that. Let's go ahead and we'll go back to Central Administration. We want to create a new service application for search. And that's going to be located under Application Management. So go ahead and click the link. Under Service Applications, choose Manage Service Applications. And you can see we have 3. We initially had 2 to start with, but since we enabled the Usage and Health Data Collection Service Application, this is now enabled also. Up at the top, you'll see a ribbon, New, Connect, Delete, Manage, Administrators, and so on. The only 2 that are available right now are New and Connect, because we haven't gotten anything selected. If I click on WSS Usage Application, just highlight the bar, and you have to be careful because it's a link. If you click the link, it's going to take you to the settings page. But if you want to be able to manage it with the ribbon up here, the Manage, set the administrators, who's got control over this, who can make the changes and so on, and manage it, you need to select the bar itself, not the link, and then the ribbon will become available. Not all of the buttons will be available. It just depends on what type of service application it is. Let's go ahead and click New and start creating our search. We're going to name this service. We're going to go with the default, but we're going to move the 1, service application. You can have multiple service applications. If you have a company that has subsidiaries and you don't want them to be able to search each other's content, you can have separate service applications. And then when you create a web application, you just associate it to that particular grouping. We're not using FAST. That allows additional search capabilities. We're going to go with the default for none. If you want additional information, there is a link there provided as long as your server does have internet access. Now, at this point, you should have already added your search service account to the list of managed accounts. So let's go ahead and select the service account that you've added to the managed accounts. And for our purposes, going to choose Intranet Search. This is the service account that will be used for search services. As we scroll down a little bit further under the application pool, there's a couple of application pools, sites that are going to be associated with the search service. You can choose an existing application pool depending on what your environment is set up for, or create a new one. We're going to create a new one, and it's a good idea to, because you will have multiple application pools, so you want it to be descriptive of what it is that it represents. And then you'll need an application pool account. We will use the Intranet Search, the one that we have designated already. And then you'll have to do the same for the Search Query and Site Settings web service. So this one, we'll give it a descriptive name. And then choose the appropriate account that's going to run that service. And you may want to have different accounts set up for it, or you can use the same one depending on the level of security that your company requires. It's highly recommended that you use different service application pool accounts for different app pools for security reasons. And now it's going to process and build the search service application. This will take a few minutes. Once it returns the search service application was created successfully, go ahead and click OK. And now you can see that we have an additional service application in our list. If I were to click on service application, I could then go in and choose who's going to administer it, publish it so it can be consumed by other farms. You can have one service application and multiple SharePoint farms pulling results from that application. SharePoint Search is one of the most critical services Microsoft offers. The main component is the crawler, which we're going to go take a peek at. From that area, that's what goes out and crawls all the content that's been designated. And it takes all those properties, all the metadata that was mentioned a couple of minutes ago. It takes all that metadata and it puts that in a search database. And then from there, it then goes and it searches all the content of that document, not the metadata per se, but the content itself, and it takes and indexes that into a text file. So you've got two components. One takes the metadata, puts it in the database. The other component takes the content and puts it in an index file, minus any noise words like and, the, at. A query is then initiated by the user to receive the search results. Now, this is the search service application search administration page. This is going to give you an overview of the settings for your search service. You've got your crawl status online, any background activity, the crawl rate. We don't have any information yet, but shortly, once we initiate a crawl, it will. The default content access account, which is internet search, content email address, for any alerts that need to go out to the SharePoint Search Administrator, and so on. If you scroll down to the bottom, you'll see the crawl history. Once the content sources have been scheduled, this will start to fill up, and it'll be incremental and full crawls, anything that has recently happened. It'll also show any active content that's being crawled. And then down towards the bottom, you've got your topology. This is the current search application topology. When that metadata is pulled from the content that's being crawled, it's placed into a content database. And that's where these come into play. These are the databases associated with the search service. And you can modify this if it's a multi-server farm. This is where you would modify it to designate this service application to run on a different server. Or if you want to change any of the database configuration information, you would modify it from this area. On the left side in the quick launch bar, you're going to see content sources. If you click on that, it's going to show you any content sources you have designated for SharePoint Search. By default, any web applications that are created will go into this content source, the local SharePoint sites. We don't have any web applications yet, but as we create them, it will start to fill this field. As we scroll down, you'll see additional options, crawl settings. You'll see crawl schedules. You can choose the full and incremental. The priority for the content source. So if you have multiple things being crawled at the same time, one's going to take priority over the other. You can choose to start a full crawl of the content source. We're going to go ahead and click Cancel. And go back to Search Administration on the left side. At this point, we need to set a search service administrator to manage the search components within our farm. So let's click on Central Administration from the breadcrumb at the top. We're going back to Manage Service Applications by clicking Application Management, Manage Service Applications. We don't want to click on Search Service Application because that's going to bring us back to the management site or the management page where the administrator would set the settings and the crawl schedule, all that stuff. We want to click on the bar to the right of it just so it's highlighted. And then on the ribbon up at the top, you're going to see Administrators. Go ahead and click on that. And from here, we're going to add a user to that. We need to add Lisa Stewart as our Search Service Administrator. So go ahead and enter her name. And you can press Enter. Oops, it helps if you type the right name. And then you can press Enter and it'll resolve the user, or you can click the Check Name button below that. If you're not absolutely sure of the spelling, you can certainly click Browse and search for it. You have to click Add on the right-hand side, and then make sure that Lisa is selected because you may have multiple users in here, and choose Full Control. And then OK. We have now designated Lisa Stewart as our Search Administrator, and she has full control to the Search Service Application. She will not be able to access Central Admin. She won't be able to do any security or anything like that. She'll just be able to access the Search Service Application. Depending on the type of service application that is created, some do allow management, some don't.